My goal was to make $1 more than a year prior. And a lot of years were uncanny. Like I'd make 100 grand in commissions and the next year I'd make 105 grand in commissions. And if you're willing to work hard in real estate sales, that just means you're going to get more commissions and the commissions are going to add up.
Welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show, where our primary focus is buy and hold cash flow real estate, not just to achieve financial freedom, but to achieve time freedom so that we can live the life doing whatever we want to do with that time freedom. We have an awesome guest today. Our guest, Pat Hiban, billion-dollar real estate agent, investor, author, former host of the Real Estate Rockstars podcast, former pedicab driver, and founder of GoBundance, the tribe of millionaires, which we are all a part of. So, Pat, welcome to the 0 to 100 podcast show.
Hey, man, good to be part of here. It's kind of like kind of feel like I'm in a younger version of the All In podcast here, you know, and I'm a special guest, special bestie. This is awesome.
I like that you said I was young, Pat, because these guys are always saying I'm old and I get sick of it. So I really appreciate you saying that.
He hides behind his hat because he's aged a lot in the last year or two. So.
You wear young looking hats, you know, and nobody knows. That's what I do. That's why I wear hats backwards and stuff like that because everyone thinks I'm a lot younger.
Takes the years off.
Hey, comparing us to the All In podcast, I'll take it. That's my favorite podcast to listen to, aside from this one, of course. And I actually know about that podcast because of you, Pat. And that's the only podcast that I listen to regularly is the All In podcast. So awesome stuff. Well, let's get into your story, Pat. You're an investor, you're a broker, a pedicab driver, author. So let's kind of start with young Pat Hiban, you know, your childhood and how did you find real estate? What attracted you to real estate and how did you end up there?
So, you know, real estate is a very highly respected asset class right now. But it wasn't always that way. And like I graduated college in 1987.
Same year as Travis.
Yeah.
Well, you just inadvertently have to make fun of Pat's age too.
That's right. No, nothing wrong with it.
80s were great. Best decade ever, Pat.
Yeah,
that's right.
Best decade.
Yeah. But my degree was sociology and my GPA was like 2.5. And I was young too. I was 21. I was like a October baby. So I was early and, you know, I just, I didn't have much direction. I thought I was going to be a probation officer. And then I found out I had to wait a year and a half to get a job as a probation officer and it didn't pay much money to be. So I ended up kind of just getting rejected by a bunch of sales jobs and somehow got my real estate license. Actually, the reason that I got my real estate license was because a guy that I knew told me I should get a job selling new homes that they were hiring and it was easy to get a job. So I thought that I needed a real estate license to sell new homes. But then once I got my license, no new home builders would hire me. So then I ended up selling. And then I was substitute teaching at the same time, trying to earn money to pay rent at the same time selling real estate. So my first full year in real estate, I made $13,700. I probably made an extra couple, 3,000 or 4,000 substitute teaching. And then it just kind of went from there. I ended up spending 25 plus years as a real estate agent, eventually developed a team. You know, I was kind of on the cutting edge of that. There wasn't a lot of all agents were independent agents, kind of like insurance brokers or those sort of agents, and they all worked for themselves. None of them really had a team. I was one of the first in our area to do that, and then I kind of rode that first wave in the early 2000s of real estate. Because I had already had the surfboard of a team built and I rode the wave really hard and no one else had a team back then.
Pat, were you in those early years, were you discouraged or were you motivated? Like hey, yes, I can do this and I can scale this thing? Or were you like, this is hard. What did I get myself into?
Well, you have to understand that like all through like I started in 87. And so all through the 90s, what people don't realize is that entire decade was like flat. Like it was an entire decade of like, average time on the market, 6, 7, 10 months. We would sell houses in 2 months, and we'd send out postcards that say sold in 60 days with like 10 explanation points. Like that was a big deal. That was a reason to use me because I sold one house in 60 days. And I'm serious. And that was like, that got people's attention. Like, holy dirt, he sold a house in 60 days. I need to use him. That's true. That's the market that it was. People, no one was investing. Very few people bought and rented out. The funny part is that 1% rule worked all day long back in the 90s, but nobody really utilized it. It just wasn't a respected asset class for whatever the reason was. So it wasn't until the like early 2000s or late 90s that I started really building a team and growing. And my first 10 years plus, it was just me kind of hustling. And I would be, my goal was to make $1 more than a year prior. And a lot of years were uncanny. Like I'd make, $100,000 in commissions, and the next year I'd make $105,000 in commissions. I mean, it was just very, very much the same all through the 90s.
I got a question. So like, for the listeners, like going through your bio is like insane. Like you're ranked world's, highest producer, a couple different brokerages, I believe, right? Keller Williams and Remax. Like in the very beginning, did you have a drive early on as a young man to go build something, to go conquer, to go sell, to go like scale? Or was it like
New York Times best-selling book? Yeah.
Like, I mean, you've got books, you're a humble guy, Pat, but like you read your bio and it's like, oh my God, like just one after another. Like what is that drive? Did it come from your childhood or your parents, or did you meet a mentor that like changed your life? Like, was there any pivotal moment there? Because I don't talk to people as successful as you are often because you're rare. So like,
well, to expand upon that, you start out, you got not a great GPA, which by the way is common in a lot of real successful salespeople and entrepreneurs, which I think is funny. You were getting rejected. Like, was this like this burning fire from something from your childhood, or?
Yeah, I kind of put myself I kind of boxed myself in a corner, I guess, because, here's the thing, like growing up, I was not good at any sports. And that's how kind of a lot of kids got their self-esteem and stuff. I would always come in, I'd be like the last picked on the kickball team every time. Like I was just that guy who would always drop the ball. It was just uncoordinated. And because of that, I think I grew like this hatred of coaches. I thought my dad put me in soccer, and my brother was really good at soccer. His team actually won a state championship his senior year at high school. I couldn't play soccer for shit. I just, and I just hated the coaches, and it grew into a hatred for authority figures. And I ended up getting fired from a couple of jobs for like cussing out the boss because he was mean to me or whatever. And, I think I was a dishwasher at least 5 restaurants that I could count, at least 5 restaurants. That was my thing. I love washing dishes. And they always would hire, right? They always needed dishwashers. So anyways, I just didn't do good with that. And so when I got out of college, I was like, I don't want a boss either. Let me do this thing. Real estate sales, there's no boss. I can be my own boss. Little did I know I wasn't gonna make that much money at first. But I guess to answer your question, I boxed myself back, and then it forced me to be self-employed. And then once I found out the possibilities of the real estate commission business, which, to this day has been extremely lopsided for the benefit of realtors, right? Like you could literally do not much work at all and make $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 or more. I started seeing that, I could sell a house and make let's say back then I could make $3,000 on a sale of a house, and my friends were selling cars making 300, or they were selling machines or something else and making $150, $200 a sale. And I was like, well, the logic mathematically doesn't make any sense. Let me just stick with this. And there were times where I did think about quitting, but I couldn't quit because there was nothing else available where I could make, 6 figures plus, being my own boss. I just couldn't. It was just very difficult to do. And I guess, and to go on trying to answer your question, I always had like a really strong work ethic. It kind of was just like ingrained in me, and so I was always willing to work hard. And if you're willing to work hard in real estate sales, that just means you're going to get more commissions, and the commissions are going to add up. And then I eventually built a team. I think because I started to get bored with the monotony of doing it all myself, and I knew it was a way to leverage more free time so I could spend time with my kids. Because at that point I started having a family. I started building a family, and I knew that it wasn't going to be able to. I was going to end up divorced if I didn't, build a team and start letting them do the work rather than me.
I think it's funny how people, and this has nothing to do with scaling real estate, and maybe people disagree, like Gabe was a state champion wrestler, but like there's so much value assigned to kids based on their athletic ability. And I don't know how else you solve that, but like, how do you assign value to kids and give them self-esteem outside of athletics? Like if they could start an entrepreneur, they'd be entrepreneurs or start a business, it always irritated me because I wasn't very athletic either. And so, but like, you're right, like that's your value is based on that. And I also love the fact that we always recommend this to people, especially when they're trying to find ways to invest in real estate, like become a good salesperson, because that's a skill that everybody needs to have. I don't care what anybody says. That's a skill that whether you're an investor or a real estate agent or a salesperson or a business owner, like understand sales. And a great way to make a lot of money is find outsized commissions, like with real estate, without a cap on it. And, with that money, you can live below your means and make your first investment into real estate. So I'm kind of rambling here, but I love the fact that you found the commission piece of that and ran with it, and then leveraged other people to find more time freedom.
Yeah, I would label it as like, you have to be greedy. Like I think some people aren't greedy. Like you have to be like greedy enough to be like, well, if I can make more money doing this, let me go get a job there. You know what I mean? Like there's a good friend of mine has 3 kids, and they're all like in their like early 20s, right? So they're all getting jobs, and his daughter found this software company to work for where, at a certain level, she'll make $800,000 a year in sales. And they're projecting her to be at that level in 5 years. And she'll be, say, 33 or something. And I'm like, dude, if she just doesn't quit and keeps plowing, that's the key. But what I see with a lot of kids and people in general, what happens? They quit and they try to go to something else. They quit. They won't move to a certain area because they're stuck in this area or, in this mindset. And they moved her to Salt Lake City, Utah. And she said yes, because she saw that $800,000 possibility in 5 years. And she's got that greed factor. And I think that if you have that greed factor, it's going to pay off because you're going to think about money.
But I think like that greed factor or that like motivation factor has been stifled in our country because a lot of parents are handing their kids money. They're like on a stipend or they're whatever. They're creating socialism. They're softening. And so like, and when I got out of high school and I had a car breakdown, like I lost the car because I couldn't pay for it. It wasn't like mom and dad came in and rescued me. Dad was like, you owe me money, buddy. I'm not giving you any more money. Like I was paying him payments. And so I felt that. I think it was fear. And then I think it turned into like a drive and a motivation not to be in that situation anymore. Cause I was back in the corner. I'm sure you felt the same way, but like you look at these kids today that are softened every time they have a challenge, they're handed money. And I think that's stifling.
Yeah. there's a term a lot of people using now called bulldozer parents. And I had to tell this to a couple Go Bros who are guilty of this. And the bulldozer parent, they bulldoze away any challenge in front of their kids, and then their kids don't learn how to deal with adversity. Right? They get in the way.
They cut a road. They cut a road for them.
They cut a road for them, and then they don't build. You're right. They don't build self-esteem. They don't build self-worth. And there's this great book out now called Bad Therapy: Why Our Kids Are Not Growing Up. And basically, it's kind of anti-therapy in a sense, but more than that, it's kind of like anti-parenthood. Like the parents are responsible. The reason the kids are in therapy is because the parents are screwing up, and the reason the parents are screwing up is because there's this false belief. Even though like a total of 4 kids really get kidnapped a year by people other than their father or mother who is in a fight with a divorce, the reality of a kid getting kidnapped is like 4 out of 20 million in the United States. And that doesn't really happen. Yet we walk them to the bus stop until they're like 15 years old, right? And they're like, they should be at 6 years old. You should be like, dude, walk to the bus stop. And guess what? If they don't wear their hat and their fingers freeze off, it's their own fault because they didn't put on their mittens,
Pat, will you watch my kids? Actually, I think they need a little more Pat Hiban in their life. So,
well, I do agree with that because I tell my kids, like, I'm not buying your car. And so my son's already like trying to figure out, okay, Dad, I'm going to go to work for, the local restaurant, bus tables. He's 10, right? Because I want to save up for my car. And I think, man, the self-esteem you give these kids is amazing if you just teach them to solve their own problems and troubleshoot and be scrappy and fall down and fail and do all these things. So
I think one of the best things you could do to your kid if they're, say, 13 is to let them know in 3 years you're getting a job. And then so by the time that they hit 15 and a half, 16, they know that that's a family expectation. Right? You let them know ahead of time.
Pat, one of the things you mentioned when you decided to start building out a team is you wanted to spend more time with your family. And I love that. And I don't want to gloss over that because one of the big things that we talk about here, and we put a lot of importance on, is that time freedom aspect, being able to spend time with your family. That was a big driving force for me. I originally thought it was the money. Like I had that strong desire to be financially free. But when I dug a little bit deeper, it came down to I wanted to own my time. I didn't want a boss so much, very much like you. I didn't want someone telling me what to do. I didn't want to show up when someone else told me to show up. I wanted to live my life the way I want to live my life. And some of that included raising my own kids, traveling, just my day looking like however it is that I wanted to design it. And so I'm curious about when did that really click for you? You're kind of doing this on your own. You built out a team, but at some point you said, hey, I want to be able to spend more time with my family. How intentional did you build out a team so that you could spend time with your family, spend time doing the things that were important to you outside of, just building the real estate business? Well,
in reality, my wife gave me an ultimatum, so to speak. We had 2 kids, 17 months apart. So it was like, but when they were like 1 and 2 or 2 and 3, it was chaotic, as you guys might know. I would get home and she would just hand both of them to me at the same time, both of them crying and be like, I'm going to take a break,
I'm done.
And I want some adult conversation with, someone else besides my kids. So anyway, so she was a big impetus, truth be told. I was a little insecure, from the beginning because my parents divorced when I was 12, and my mom used to always say that my dad was a workaholic. And that was the reason that she filed for divorce, because he worked too hard. So that was in the back of my mind already. So when my wife basically said, look, this has got to stop. You need to figure this out. I did. And it's the funny part is that's how I ended up meeting David Osborne. I was at a RE/MAX seminar and a guy handed me a flyer that said, earn twice as much commissions and work 50% of the hours. And I brought it back and I showed it to my wife, and she goes, if it's true, then you go. So I went. It was in Phoenix, Arizona. It was like a seminar mastermind. And I went there, and that's the day I met David. And it actually did work. He taught us in this seminar how to take time off. And I came back and I put things in place with my team where I told them, these are the activities that I want to do, and everything else you guys are going to do. And on Thursdays, I'm not coming in. And if you call me, you got to pay me $75.
Oh, I love that.
And so, we worked in a real estate office, a RE/MAX office with 100 some agents all around. And it was easy for them to just walk to the next office or a couple offices down and say, what would you do in this situation? I can't get a hold of Pat. They always figure it out. They always rise to the occasion, right?
So creating those rules, and I'm curious about how well did that work? But also, I mean, the story I heard when you and Dave Osborne met, you also competed, if I remember the story correctly, on either who worked more, or maybe it was more who had more productive hours. I don't remember exactly what that competition was. So it's not like you just stopped working. You implemented some of these rules, but it sounded like you were still very competitive, especially once you met David Osborne.
Yeah, we used to have this little system, and the funny thing is, I'm cleaning our house, and I found some old emails printed out. I'll share them with you guys, but they basically, we had this system where there were three things. There was total hours worked, which say on a Wednesday, let's say 12 hours or 10 hours. There was dollar productive hours, which would be like what you were doing that actually made you money. So for me, it was going on a listing appointment or having a buyer look at a house, something that actually led to a commission, cold calling, prospecting, things like that. And then the third thing was what we call World 2. We had World 1 and World 2. World 1 was regular work, right? Vertical income. World 2 was horizontal income, which is like, did you look at any rental properties? Did you analyze a deal? And then put the amount of hours spent like that. So it would look like 10 hours worked, 4 hours dollar productive, 1 hour World 2. And we would send that every day back and forth. And for him, it was meeting agents to convert them to Keller Williams agents from RE/MAX agents. That would be dollar productive. And the horizontal would be the same. So, and we did that for years and years and years. And then, eventually, of course, we only sent that on the days that we worked. So if I took off, eventually I took off Thursdays and then Sundays as well. So if I took off Thursdays and Sundays, I wouldn't send that email, of course.
So what ratio would you give each other shit about? Meaning if you sent that email and you were 80% or 70% dollar productive and the rest was just filler. Mitch and I always talk about this. By the way, I need to charge Mitch $75 an hour every time he calls me. I love that. I'm going to take that away. Is it?
What our rule was 50% and 10%. So like 50%, it's very hard to be 100% dollar productive because so much other crap comes in. Like sending, responding to an email or something is not dollar productive. So it's very hard to be 5 hours of prospecting or 5 hours of only something that's going to lead to money. But that was our goal, 50% and 10% was our goals. And then the 40% would just be crap.
So I was going to say, I think it's so interesting that because I was told early on, if you want to be really successful in business, that you got to say goodbye to your family, or you got a choice, right? Or if you want to be have a good relationship and be there for your kids and be there for your wife, then you need to say goodbye to these dreams of business and dreams of sort of like building an empire or castle or something. But then and I don't know what book it was, but it was like this. I remember reading this guy was like, yeah, like my goal every year is to double the business and to take more time off and to take, another 10 days off or whatever his goals were. And I learned that whatever you sort of create, you can actually, in other words, you can create your own world, exactly your own world, your own schedule, your own week, your own metrics, your own KPIs. And today I think I have a good, strong business and a strong relationship. I have both, which I'm really fortunate for. But when you when you linked up with David Osborne, when you created this, when you started to stick to this, did that change your life? Did that change your, like, what did your wife say to you? Did you feel like you were there for her? Like, maybe talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things I'd respond with. It's very hard, of course, in the beginning. Like it's almost unrealistic, I would say, in the beginning. I mean, that's a problem with a lot of people nowadays is they don't want to hustle, right? They don't want to work hard. And the reality of it is if you want to get ahead, you need to work hard. Now, that being said, you can certainly find balance and hopefully you have a spouse that appreciates that, which is something you have to ask them, right? They might not want you to they might not care whether you have a lot of money or not.
It's also interesting that you said that, Pat, because there's this counterculture happening. You always see things swing. Like first it was like grind it out, don't have a family if you want to make it big. Then there was this whole movement of, do a 3-hour morning routine and meditate and do your cold plunge and then, do your visualizations and your affirmations and then maybe work for an hour and then do your influencer on social media. And but it's like now you see guys like Alex Hermosi or Cody Sanchez are like, what you got to do to get successful? You got to go fucking work. You got to work. Like you're going to have to work. You're going to have to grind it out, And so you see the pendulum swinging a little bit both ways. And and I do agree. There's, especially when you're starting out, like I've never met anybody that's really, really, really successful that started out with nothing by doing a 4-hour morning routine. They got up and got their ass to work. Right. So it's also just like, what's your advice now to the younger generation that's coming up behind you and that do want to build empires and castles, but also want to spend time with their family and enjoy life and those sorts of things?
I mean, hopefully they're eventually going to figure it out, right? I just went to a wedding and I got to spend some time with the groom because he gave me a ride. The guy's like 28 and he's making $15 an hour and he's got a college degree and his wife who he married is a school teacher and he was talking about that they want to get a bigger house and they want to do all these things and I didn't say anything to his face because I didn't want to I don't want to get involved like that. There's a place for everything, right? This is like the day after he got married. But I came home to my wife and I said, this dude needs to man up. Like he needs to, I mean, it's a gender statement, but it can be more universal.
He probably listens to our show.
Yeah. Like he needs to stop, he should be out, he should be bartending or something, or waiting tables at night. Like, you know what I mean? Like he needs to bring some more money in here, or he needs to get a better job. And if it means moving from the area that he lives in to another area to make 3 times as much, or finding something to do that he doesn't like to make 3 times as much, in my opinion, he needs to do that because they're going to be pregnant. I guarantee it within a year. And
well, what was I'm not going to say this right, but I'll try. But it's like there's that quote, and it's like bad times make strong men make good times make weak men. Right? It goes in this circle, and it's like I feel like we've come off a really, really great economic run in this country, and we have a population that doesn't, like, you go talk to my grandpa who was born in 1929, he's like, go to work. I went to work at 14, or whatever. And it's like, and so anyway, I just feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm seeing it everywhere.
We've also been sold that, like, you talk about this guy, like, I have a college degree. Hopefully somebody will forgive it for me because that's ridiculous that I have to pay people back for something I signed up for, but also like, I should have a better paying job. I should be making a lot more money. They told me in high school that if I got a college degree, that everything would be taken care of. And that we talk about mindset here a lot. Is you have to be contrarian and sort of reject what you're being told and sold and the software that's being downloaded in your brain. And I agree. Like you got to get scrappy and you have to figure it out. And I know we're sounding like a bunch of old curmudgeons now.
Well, no, I think it's an important topic. And Pat, I'm curious to your thought around this because in my early years, I was not afraid to work hard, but I also very much wanted to own my time, right? And so I learned how to create a life where I'm not out there grinding, where I'm able to spend time with my family. And I actually think my most productive time is when I'm not grinding, when I'm thinking, when I'm out on a walk, when I'm, talking to, people that I look up to and people that I'm around that inspire me. And it doesn't necessarily feel like work, but I feel like that's some of my most productive hours. And so, where's that balance of like being productive and, I guess being busy and being productive, I don't think are the same. And often I see people fall into the other side of that trap is where they're busy, and they're working and they never look up to realize that they're actually not spending time building wealth. They're just grinding. They're not only not building wealth, they're not enjoying time with their family. They're not actually living the life that they want to live. So where is that balance of work hard versus work towards something that actually matters and aligns with what you want in life?
That's, this is an interesting topic, right? So it is, and again, here's my opinion. Less than 1% of 1% or whatever, a tenth of 1% of people actually are doing the job that they, would love to do in life. Truth be told, if I could do the job that I loved at 21 years old, I'd be an elementary school social studies teacher or something, right? Because I love little kids or kids. I'd probably be a high school teacher because I like talking to teenagers and stuff and mentoring them and stuff like that. But it certainly didn't pay any money, so I didn't do it. And I was hungry for money. And I also wanted to be my own boss. So anyways, I think it's disingenuous to say follow your passions, because the reality of it is it's very, very hard to do, right? And make any sort of decent money. That the chances of you doing that. Now, you could certainly make a ton of money and then follow your passions at 45 years old after you've sold your company for a couple mil or whatever, and then become a social studies high school teacher or an artist or whatever,
or a pedicab driver.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's the thing. You gotta, it's just not realistic. Now, here's the thing. Here's the other conversation. We live in a society with double standards, right? Like if you have a daughter and she brings home a guy that's in pre-law or pre-med, you're chatting about it with your friends. Oh, the dude's she's dating a guy who's going to be a lawyer, right? But she brings home that social studies teacher and is maybe not so much a topic of conversation. But women in our society can be social studies teachers, and it's like, great, good job, right? So it's a bit of a double standard that we need to work around. And I guess there's a lot of gender discussions right now, which is good for that, right? Like what's right and what's wrong, and is it okay being a stay-at-home mom and stuff like that, and a dad? And I think the answers are unequivocally yes. Like it can be, it doesn't need to be the man doing this and the woman doing that. And but that being said, is a societal thing that men have to go up against that's harder than women. Does that make sense? And when it comes to doing your passion, women could easily be an artist while their husband's a successful businessman, but it's harder for a man to be an artist while the woman is a successful businesswoman emotionally in our society. Am I making sense?
100%. Yeah, it's there. I love the fact that you say double standards, because I do feel that way sometimes. There's a lot of pressures on both genders, that have to fit in their specific role. Like, for example, a man has to be grinding, be very successful and make lots of money. But, it's like the guy in the chick flick. He's always in the suit. He just got done working, but you never really see him work. But he's also very thoughtful and spends a lot of time coming up with great gifts and love notes and things like that. And anyway,
Are you talking about me? Because that sounds exactly like me. I just,
anyway,
we'll
you're
find
the guy that's thoughtless, and I'm joking. Yeah. So Pat, I love this topic, but I also want to get back into like scaling. So you are the number one salesperson in the world for Keller and Remax. So that's unbelievable. Is that, if you were to sum up why you were so successful just in the sales role into sort of just like a 30-second answer, why were you so successful? Because you did it twice. You caught lightning in a bottle twice. Like, what was sort of the reason for that success? And then the follow-on question is, then how did that parlay into becoming an investor into real estate? What did that journey look like? So A, how did you get to be so damn successful as a salesperson? B, how did you parlay that into start acquiring rental units or cash flow or those types of things? Lead us through that journey.
So I was always willing to try new things, but I also never really tried to reinvent the wheel. I always like copied people, but then made it better. And so, when I built my real estate team, I got the idea. I'd go to like the Remax convention or whatever, and then I'd get ideas from other guys in Ohio or California that were building teams, and I would just bring them back and copy them. And then when it came to figuring out how to get more leads, which is the question all real estate agents ponder constantly, I saw where some people were having an unfair advantage as far as getting more leads than the other agents around them, and I put those into place. But I did it better than the guy I copied in Arizona. And it's specifically an example of that would be I copied this guy named Russell Shaw at Scottsdale, Arizona. He was doing television commercials. Nobody was doing TV commercials really ever, and not much in real estate. So I got with him, and he actually taught me how to do his. I did his verbatim. Like, I didn't change a single word. And then, within a year, I put a spin on it. Then with another year, I put a spin on it. And I always tried like new creative television commercials. I did like 10 different TV commercials. They're all on YouTube. There's old ones on YouTube, but and they worked. And then I would just find it hilarious that I would make a commercial and put it on someone's TV, and it would be like cold calling into their house, and being like on their TV screen. And it'd be hilarious the next day when people would just call and be like, "Hey, yeah, I saw you on TV last night." And
you're like, "This shit works. I'm just going to keep doing it."
Yeah, I was like, "This is great." Like, and then so we just kind of kept adding more money, and then eventually just manifested. Now, of course, it all comes to an end, right? Like in 2008, it all stopped, and people stopped calling. And so I then went on to try new things and do new things, and so to answer the question, I guess I'm always open to trying new things. I'm always open to putting a spin on things, and I'm very open to failing at things. Like I've done, since I got out of real estate, I've probably done 10 or 12 ventures. 10 have failed pretty bad, like lost money or whatever. And then 2 stuck, one being GoBundance and one being Adapt Acquisitions, which is our multifamily apartments. We have, 2,000 units. Those 2 stuck. 10 other ones just were like disasters.
So Pat, can you talk about that for a second? Because first of all, I love your mindset on that, because you just talked about failure. Like, it's like, and in other words, like some people fail and it's like, oh my gosh, from now on, I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to go forward and I'm going to maybe get a W-2 or a job, or I'm going to, anyway, like you just kind of said that flippantly, but like you're talking about failing company. You're talking about companies or ideas that didn't flourish. Like, maybe talk about one of those failures if you don't mind. And then also talk about like, how do you have the power? Where does that come from to be like, screw it, let's try something else? Because that, like you just said, 2 of them went massive, by the way. 2,000 units and GoBundance, I would say, are both incredible things. But there's 10 in the graveyard. So anyway, talk about one of your failures if you don't mind. And then also like, what is the power behind you, or what's the mindset that's like, let's just keep trying?
So, okay, like a good example is, so you know the football guy, Ricky Williams? He's like a stoner from the Miami Dolphins.
I think I've heard of him, but we're not football guys. So
back in the like 90s or whatever, he won a Heisman Trophy, and he was a football player for Miami Dolphins. And then he tested positive for weed and he got thrown out. Then he came back. He played for the New Orleans Saints and the Ravens. And anyways, he was famous for smoking weed. And so David met him at a golf outing. And so he's like, dude, I don't have a sports agent now. I want a sports agent. And I think that, I'm known for marijuana, and the marijuana industry is growing. This was like 2016, let's say 2015, maybe. So 8 years ago. And, it's going to be all legal, and we should latch on to a cannabis, something, right? Get with a bunch of cannabis companies. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. That's going to be great. So Ricky and I met, and Matt King was involved actually way back then. And Matt King and I went to Vegas and to California and to Colorado with Ricky. And, we took him to a bunch of different places that were just getting on the, I think weeds legalized like a year prior in Colorado. So that was a hot spot. And then California, at least medically there. So there were hot spots like that we went to, and we spent all this time negotiating and setting up these contracts, and this was going to be like this huge thing. And then, none of it really panned out. It was too premature. It was like way premature, like 6 years premature, and it failed. And then I was talking to David one day. He says, the juice isn't worth the squeeze on this. And I thought to myself, well, shit, I've been to Colorado with this guy and California, and I negotiated all these contracts that didn't go through, and I spent all this time. We had a logo, we had collared shirts made up and all this stuff, business cards, and there's a saying they say on the All In podcast that Chamath says. He says, "I have strong beliefs, but I hold them weakly."
I love that.
And I think I'm like that. And so originally I got defensive. I was like, no, I'm not. I don't want to, I'm not ready to give up. And then the next day, literally, I called David and said, yeah, fuck this thing. Rick, it's not worth it. Let's just tell Ricky that he's on his own. And that was that. So I held that belief weakly, but I was obsessed with it for a year. Like, we put a lot of time in it. And there were a lot of things. There were several things like that. I mean, Real Estate Rockstars was one. I did 800 episodes, but the year that I sold it, I lost $60,000. Aaron Amuchastegui bought it, but it was losing money, and he saw value add in it, and there were multiple offers on it, so there was some value. I didn't sell for much. I sold for $250,000, but in my mind, it was a loser. Like, I was going to ditch it. Like, I was like, I'm not doing another 800 episodes. And I regretted. Some days I would do 3 or 4 of them, and I would wake up and be like, man, I don't feel like talking to another agent.
Brian, I'd love to transition a little bit into passive income or horizontal income, because you mentioned that was something that you and David had talked about. I know in GoBundance, that's a big pillar, is the horizontal income. So I know you've tried a bunch of businesses. Some failed, some succeeded, but I'm curious about the transition from running the brokerage and transitioning into the horizontal income. Some of the passive investments you've done that have been successful or unsuccessful.
When I was first, all through the 90s or whatever, I should have been buying a house a year. In hindsight, I do regret that. I wish I was just buying these 1% houses and just renting them long term, but I didn't. I bought like 2, maybe. And then all my money went into the stock market. The .com craze happened. I was able to take like $300,000 and turn it into $1.2 million. And then literally overnight or within a couple of months, it went back down to $300,000. And it was, I was a millionaire for less than a year. And I was not a millionaire anymore for probably 4 more years after that. And so, it was at that time that I said to my broker at Merrill Lynch, I said, sell everything, give me the 300 grand that's left, and I'm going to buy real estate. And I went and I went to University of Maryland College Park and I bought 7 houses because they were, the numbers worked really good there, and I enjoyed student rentals and stuff. So I bought 7 houses. And then from there, as far as scaling is concerned, it's very difficult to scale. And I know Gabe's done it, and you guys have probably done it better than me. But I found it difficult to scale to commercial real estate from residential real estate without a partner. So I found partners, and I bought a shopping center with David and Tim. I bought office building with just me and David. I bought, of course, like the first 4 or 5 apartment buildings or complexes were bought just me, Tim Rode, Andrew Cushman, and David. And then eventually everybody but David ran out of money to put into them. So because of that, then we had to start syndicating. That was a byproduct of running out of money for down payments. So again, you're adding more partners when you syndicate, right? So I when people ask me what's the easiest way to go to scale from single family long-term rentals or even short-term rentals to commercial real estate is partnerships, in a simple term, at least my experience.
I love that you said that, because we always talk about investing as a team sport. Like, we talk about what are what's the magic that allows you to scale? If you raise capital and partner with people with money, you can buy bigger properties. You can buy anywhere in the country with different cash flow fundamentals. I love that you said that. I did have one question before I forget to ask. And maybe you don't know the answer to this, or maybe you just know it in rough strokes. If you had kept the $300,000 in the market, what would it be worth now, as opposed to what are those 7 houses? Maybe you don't own them anymore, but what would what would work if you kept $300,000 in the market, or kept those 7 houses and let them appreciate, or maybe tap the equity to then continue to grow your portfolio? Like, where would you be at?
So let's ask that a different way. If I did not give a value to GoBundance, the company, because like companies grow at a much greater scale and kind of inflate one's net worth a lot faster, right? So let's just say if I compared real estate to the stock market.
I'm just talking specifically the $300,000 that you cashed out and you bought those 7 houses. And then I'm not talking about GoBundance, just like those 7 houses. Did you still own them? Did you parlay them did you trade them out and upgrade them to apartment buildings? That's fine. But like, because people, there's always like the stock market versus real estate argument, which is not even really an argument. We know real estate's about it.
No, I did that. I did that once. It was several years ago. And quite frankly, it's hard the stock market has gone like just astronomical in the last 20 some years. Like, it's just crazy. You know what I mean? It's made simple people very rich. So I can't say that real estate beat it. But one of the things that I know probably over time has come out ahead is, because I'm a real estate professional, because I was a real estate agent and I took that designation, I've never not had that designation. That thing is the holy grail of all tax codes. So I've saved I've millions and millions and millions on taxes over the last 4 decades. So that will put me way ahead. And I'm also ADD, so it's very, for me, it's fun, right? Like, this is what I do. Like, literally, for those houses I bought at University of Maryland, there was, I had 7. I sold 4 of them over time, parlayed them into other things. One I parlayed into our shopping center that I bought with David and Tim. 3 of them I still have. I literally went to one this morning. I hadn't been there in like 5 or 6 years, and I met the property manager on it because we're thinking about clearing out the backyard and turning it into a parking lot. And there's this app called Spaces, and they're renting out spaces in University of Maryland for $250 a month so students can park at them. And I'm like, dude, put gravel back here and make as many spots as you can for me, So like, I'm still having fun with that stuff. You know what I mean? So So I enjoy it. So I've gotten a lot of pleasure and a lot of enjoyment. I've constantly looking at my net worth statement and constantly, doing horizontal income. I'm doing this cool thing now with churches, with a GoBro, where we're buying the Episcopal Church is going out of business in Baltimore City, and they're selling all their churches. And we bought 2 churches, and we were making one into a restaurant and 50 multifamily homes, and then apartments, and then we're making another into a WeWork space, a beer garden, and we got a snow cone stand out front. So we're like reallocating what do you want to call it? The asset class. We're just changing the asset class of a church. Keeping it a church and a cool looking church. But anyways, it's stuff like that that's kind of fun and I think keeps me busy. I would be very, very bored just sitting there looking at the stock market. Probably way too bored. It's too boring. I only like it if I could sell, and then buy again.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I get it. I think we all have that, like, I don't know. There's that. A lot of real estate investors I find, they have the same thing. Like they're like driven for even when you make it, you're like, well, what else can I go do? What other value can I create? Where can I put all this energy? I think we all have a little bit of that. It's neat. I respect it.
It's boring to look at the stock market because we like to look at it and it goes up and down and up and down. And you have no control. There's no cash flow. Usually there's no tax benefits. And so, it's a great way to, I believe it's a great way to diversify your portfolio. But when you're sort of ADD entrepreneurs or, like us, and real estate's, it's a great place to be. So some of the takeaways there that I'm getting, by the way, I didn't want to gloss over the R&D, rip off and duplicate. So many successful people that I met, I'm going back, they find things that work that other people are doing and they just copy it. And they have a lot of success. And I would add, R&D and I, rip off, duplicate, and then maybe iterate to improve over time. Also, I love the fact that you said fail. Like you're not afraid to fail and you don't get emotionally tied to it. You're like, oh, this sucks. I spent an hour, a year or whatever working on this thing. But at some point you need to cut your losses financially, but also cut your losses emotionally. And so I love that you said that. Those are 2 things that I just unpacked on people that might be listening to this, trying to figure out how do I really scale, invest with people that have money. Real estate investing is a team sport. And so you invest with Andrew, right? Cushman, who we had on the podcast here a few weeks ago. So you guys is that part of your syndication?
Yeah. So Andrew was like one of the first members, with Gabe and some others, GoBundance back in the day, we sat down with him before anyone was, the syndication was not a thing at all. And we're like, let's buy some apartments together. Let's scale up. So me and Andrew and Tim and David sat down and decided to do that. And we did it, like I said, with our own money. And we got our heads kicked in. We got one that had 3 murders in it. He might have told you about it.
That's just a Tuesday for us. What?
What's that?
Joking. I'm joking. Gabe and I are in these Oklahoma City properties that we've had to deal with. I'm like, 3 murders? That's just a Tuesday for us.
At least there wasn't 4.
At least there wasn't 4. Well, they said if it was a 4th, they would have taken away our rental license. So
jeez.
Yeah, that was a problem.
You missed it by 1.
We had to sell it. We sold it because we were afraid of losing our license, and also it was going to take like $1 million to put in security cameras and lights and fences and that was one of the things that we had to quit. And that was the second one we ever bought. We've probably bought 15, 18, all together. And that was the second one we bought. And we all lost our ass. We lost all our equity basically on the second one. Thank God we didn't syndicate it.
Well, that's the good point. A lot of people would do, Gabe says this all the time. They have a nightmare happen like that and they quit. The end. I'm done. I'm going to go get a job. I'm going to stop doing this. But how have you done on the subsequent, 17 to 18 properties you've purchased? I'm sure they've more than made up for the money that you lost on the second murder deal.
Yeah, David was on Andrew for like 5 years straight. Andrew, you still haven't made up for that loss. You know what I mean? And finally we broke even. And then that was 5 years ago or so. And of course, we're way ahead of it now. But yeah, it did take 3, 4, 5 years before we broke even with equity on the money that we lost on that second deal.
But you kept going. And something else that you mentioned is Andrew, like identifying people that have really amazing skill sets that can complement what you do. And maybe I'm wrong on this, but I feel, and I know I've heard Tim talk about this too. Tim Rhodes, who's one of the other founders of GoBundance. You guys like met Andrew and were like, we got to like work with this guy because he's like an integrator, right? He's very dialed in operationally, which might have been something that you guys like. I know us, me and Mitch, we're not interested in operating and the ongoing operations. We have an asset manager and a CEO that runs our little private equity company. We like putting the deals together. That's fun. Then we get bored. So I don't know. I don't want to gloss over that. Was Andrew the sort of guy where you guys sat down and met and you're like, we got to figure out a way to get this guy in our world because he's a puzzle piece that could really help us accelerate us to where we want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. You gotta find those people, and then you gotta say those exact things. There's a good book. I just finished reading this book. It's called Lucky Me. You know this? Look it up. I forget the guy's name because I don't follow sports, but it's a sports book about a sports agent, and he's LeBron James's sports agent. And he said he met LeBron James in an airport when he was like 19, and LeBron was 19. And they partied together, and that weekend, and LeBron James said, "Look, I'm getting, I'm going somewhere, and I don't know what I want to do, but I know I want you in my world. So I'm going to start paying you $40,000 a year, and I don't know what your job is or what your thing is, but I need you in my sphere, in my posse." And the dude was like, he was a drug dealer, Rich Paul's his name. And now he's like the number one sports agent in the business, right? He's got like everybody, but that's how he got his start. And my point is, LeBron saw him and said, this guy is crazy and is way better than a drug dealer. Let me pay him a salary with this money that I'm starting to get and keep him close because I'm going to put him somewhere. And he's worked for him ever since.
And probably a huge part of his success too, LeBron James, right? Like that $40,000 was a minuscule investment. I know Mitch feels that way about me, the lucky me. He feels that way. He should write a book about meeting me, but we're past the top of the hour. And I want to make sure you guys, if you have any other questions for Pat before we get into the parting questions for the podcast.
I don't think so. I think okay. I've got one, Pat. And you can just say no, by the way, too. But do you have any crazy ideas right now that you're thinking about? Because I feel like you're a serial entrepreneur. You move fast. Is there anything like that you're kind of dreaming about and you're going, man, should I go do that? Should I go try that? And if no, that's cool. But like,
well, the thing that comes with that is like, I like things that are what I call ELF, right? And you've probably heard this before, ELF: easy, lucrative, and fun. Oh,
I like that.
And if they're not ELF, then I won't do them. And part of that is ease, right? Especially at my age, I'm like, the juice is not worth the squeeze. Like I got to make $1 million or else it's just, off something, you know what I mean? Or it's not worth it. I don't want to do something that's going to make me 50 grand. So I think of things all the time, but then I realize that I don't want to do them.
I get that. No, that's fair.
I totally get that. Absolutely.
One of the things that I really want to do that, Sam Wigert does, and you guys might do it, is the pad split thing where, you rent out the rooms. We have most of my time I live in a beach community. I live on an island, and there's a huge problem with workforce housing, having to ride bicycles across busy roads and walk, miles to get to work, just to work at a coffee shop or a bar or whatever. And no one can afford to live on the island that actually makes $20 an hour. It's just unaffordable. So I would love to get into some sort of long-term workforce housing type stuff where I buy mini homes, like tiny homes, and put them all in a lot, or 10 mobile homes, or a couple of houses, and do what Sam does and pad split them, where you rent out the things. And I still want to do that, but I don't want to do all the work for it. So But stuff like that all the time, man. I mean, went out to dinner last night, and I've had this idea in my head. It's called a wobble knot.
Oh, this is what I was trying to get to
Yeah,
right
I
here.
knew.
The
I
wobble
knew
knot.
that. Yeah.
All right.
The wobble knot. I've had the wobble knot idea for like 25 years, man.
All right. What's the wobble knot?
But basically, it's you know what silly putty is?
Yeah.
It's like a piece of clay. And so you get this clay, you just get this piece of clay and you put it in some really fancy packaging and you call it a wobble knot. And whenever the table wobbles at the restaurant, you take it and you put it underneath. So you don't have to put like a sugar packet under there, you know? And it's wobble knot, so it doesn't wobble. And then you sell it in packs of like 50, and then every waiter and waitress, as part of their thing, they put a pen, they put a notepad, everything in their apron, they put some wobble knot in there. And whenever anybody has a wobbly table, they use the wobble knot. You know, they use this clay, and it costs like 10 cents to make, and you can sell it for like $5 a package.
I'm in. I'm 100% in. I love the wobble knot. Hey man, let's connect after this call because we're going wobble. I'm going to go get the URL right now.
Take it down.
I love that. That's what I was trying to get to. I knew there was something.
Oh, every day I'm thinking of shit like that. I can't help myself. I got thrown out of a coffee shop last year. Like the dude just spent like $1 million remodeling his coffee shop, and I'm like, dude, you should have made this window open so people could walk up with their dogs and stuff, and you could serve coffee out there. And you should have made this. It's all shaded over there. Shit. I started giving him all this advice, and he's like, "Yo, man," he's like, "I just spent $1 million doing this. You know, I don't need any more advice."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh, sorry."
He's like, "Take your wobble knot and get out." You know?
Yeah. Take your wobble knot and get out of there. I love it.
Get out of here.
Yeah. All right, Gabe, why don't you take us out of here with Pat, our final question of the day, and then for the elites that want us, do we book some time for Pat Stone for a few minutes for our elites to jump on and ask some questions after?
Yeah, sure. I don't have anything after this, so I'm fine.
Cool. Awesome.
Awesome. We'll go to work on the wobble knot after the getting on the phone with the elite. So, all right, Gabe, take it away.
Yeah. So our final question that we ask all our guests is: say you've lost everything, your net worth, your network, sitting on your buddy's couch. You could be sitting on my couch for all I care. You're sitting on my couch and you've lost everything. What's the first thing you do?
It's going to depend on like my circumstance, like how old I am and whether I have kids at home or whatever. I remember meeting a guy carrying my bags in at a hotel that told me he used to have a huge multi-million-dollar business and it went under, and he was carrying bags. And I was like, wow, that's a big shift. I said, when did this happen? And he said, last week. He said, but I got 3 kids, man. I can't mess around. I'm in here earning tips. And I said, God bless you, you know? So I think the answer, you immediately got to get to work if you need the money, if you lost everything, right? I think busyness begets business. You know what I mean? You get out there and get busy and you're going to start talking to people. He probably ended up meeting somebody and carrying their bags, and that person ended up putting them in their sphere of influence like LeBron James did with Rich Paul. You know, it's the same concept, right? It's like meeting people with GoBundance and, you know, your podcast. I don't know how you guys met, but.
Well, I met Mitch at a fundraiser, unfortunately. Ugh. But then we met Gabe and through GoBundance. So
put yourself out there. Just get out there. You just got to get out there. That would be the answer to the question. Just get out there and start hustling again, and then figure out where the unfair advantage is. Figure out where the biggest commissions are, or the easiest way to make money, or figure out, who the Gabe is or who the Travis is, who can get you there the fastest and you could add value to, kind of like how Matt King did, stuff like that.
I love that you've said it a few times today, unfair advantage. Like like that. You could write a book on that. Maybe that's your next book, Pat. Like how, always think, and it's not greed. I don't think we used that word earlier. I think it's greed. I think it's our God-given right we live in this country to be scrappy and get ahead. But how can you, and I did that growing my tech company. I found an unfair advantage and I was able to go national with it, and it pissed all my competitors off, and they said it was unfair. I'm like, you're right. It is unfair, but it's called capitalism. I love that you say, go find your unfair advantage. And I also like that you say, go out and tell everybody, because and build networks and find out whose sphere of influence you can get into. Because think about that guy that was carrying your bags. He probably told everybody his story and struck up conversation. And you're right. By telling that many people, shit's going to happen. You're going to attract people into your world. So attract people into your world, build relationships. Gabe always says it's a relationship game. And then go find how you can get an unfair advantage over your competition. Boom. Mic drop. Pat Hiban. Damn. Thanks for being here, man. That was an awesome answer.
Yeah, Pat, appreciate you. I appreciate you being on here today.
My pleasure. It was fun.